Hello and welcome to this month's episode of KJ's Corner. KJ's Corner, my little piece of the internet where I like to interview pretty prominent individuals, really in any space. I used to limit that just to tech, but obviously, Andersen here does work in tech. But to that point, I'm not relegating it just to people who work in tech. To that point, before we start with anything, very appreciative of you taking the time to listen to this today. Please like, please comment, please subscribe. Andersen, you'll do as well. But enough about KJ's Corner, enough about me. I'm going to pass it off to Andersen Yu. He is the head of solutions engineering and architecture at Front. Candidly, he's an SE just like us, or some of us who are out in the space. I know not everyone's a sales engineer, but a lot of people are trying to break into that space. Andersen, how are you, man? How are things before we get started here?
Awesome. Thanks for having me here, KJ. Really excited to be here and chat a little bit more about my career. But yeah, the happy Monday, everyone. We all
Sure.
get the Monday blues a little bit, but this makes my Monday a little bit more easy to look forward to.
Well, to inspire some people while we're listening to this, and maybe I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, you did say you started your morning workouts again. So that might be why you got those Monday blues, right?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, my left quad is definitely very sore right
There
now.
it is. Cool. So what was the workout? What were you doing? Were you doing like an actual lifting workout, cardio, or
no, just like a circuit thing? Like I've not gotten really kind of back into the workout. I've really kind of stayed in working out after work or on the weekends, but like introducing something bright and early at 8 a.m., especially on the West Coast, where East Coast folks, EMEA has all already woken up. Your inbox is absolutely trashed. It's kind of hard to kind of get in the zone.
Yeah, I could feel. Yeah, you're trying to get in the zone while also trying to read about what you're gonna need to prep for. Yeah, that sounds miserable. I love living on the East Coast for like that exactly. That's hilarious. That's funny. Yeah. Anyways, to that point, you are the head of solutions engineering and architecture at Front. From what I understand, and actually I'm just going to read from your website because it's great. Front is actually a new way to route, respond to, and measure all customer conversations. Seems to be email focused, but instead of me pontificating, why don't you tell us a little bit about Front and what it looks like to be in the role of head of solutions engineering?
Yeah, so I think the easiest way to understand Front is a help desk alternative. So instead of using like a Zendesk, an Intercom, like your traditional ticketing system, what Front provides you is a really easy, intuitive user interface. You're kind of communicating back and forth with customers over email. There's no kind of ticket feel to it. It just is email. But the underlying infrastructure is all automation, is all kind of the robust rules that you would have in place, enterprise controls that you would want in place, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a pretty interesting prospect. I've been at Front coming up on 8 years.
You're gonna get it, man. It's that. From what I can understand, you're gonna hit 8 years for sure.
I definitely, I like I was telling KJ, it's very much been a big part of my career. I mean, I joined when Front was about like 20 people. So now we're close to 300.
OG, man.
Yeah, I'm drinking that Kool-Aid real strong. But I mean, my time at Front has been really interesting. One, I'm grateful for Front for having given me the opportunity to enter in with one role and now kind of be in the role that I am at now, leading the solutions engineering and architecture functions. And it's been really cool to kind of see it evolve, both like the need in the business and recognizing needing kind of a solutions engineering and architecture presence and what that means for our company. But because like when I joined, we didn't have any of this.
Startups don't have any structure.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like running like crazy. You're wearing what, 5 different hats for like what? Yeah,
totally. Yeah,
absolutely.
Maybe that's the thing is like when you're joining such a small company, you really inherently are a solutions engineer, regardless of what your title is.
I can agree with that. Yeah,
you are that, and that's why I feel like maybe we can get into this later on as well. But like how I ultimately got here, I feel like is because I was doing the job to some degree, maybe not as focused or as kind of intentional as we like have the space to do now, but kind of when we were stepping in, I was like, oh, it's not that different than when we were a small company. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And I think let's just dig into it because I think a vast majority of the conversation is really so looking at Andersen's LinkedIn right now, which, hey, by the way, go check him out. Right. He's actually got a nice little profile there if you want to emulate it. He also put out a nice little TikTok video, which I thought was super cute. To that point, looks like it would have been September of 2021. It looks like the company had asked you, and I'm going to 2-prong this. They had asked you to move from being a principal solutions engineer. So well done, taking the title here. So
Thank
you're
you.
a little bit ahead of me here, right, in terms of career hierarchy, right? But then they asked you to be a manager of solutions engineering prior to you becoming director. And I think there's always a stepping stone to that. So two questions to that. Actually, and I think I can ask it the same way. Would you argue it was the unconscious competence in the role, one, which gave you the blanket, hey, this person's qualified? But two, you talked about something a little bit there, which is kind of around go-to-market strategy, where you said it's an alternative, right, in terms of the way the product market. And I look at that and I say, oh, you're trying to meet users where they're at, right? You obviously probably can expand that out, let it be part of an automated sequence, so on and so forth, right? But you're saying now meet the users at what they want, allow them to customize certain things, and so on and so forth, right? So I guess my bigger question around this is, what was it that allowed you to take that go-to-market strategy, because you've been there for such a long time, infuse it into your role from a competence perspective, and then you know, eventually, how did that eventually lead to you leading a team of people? And I'll let you run from there.
It's a good question. I think to start off, I'll start with kind of like how I even kind of got to the position of being a principal, because
Love that.
I think my journey is maybe a little unorthodox, but maybe not. I feel like as I've met more leaders,
I mean, you ripped
like,
through the titles pretty quick, to be honest with you, man. Like, you know, I mean, I did too. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm a principal at 30, right? I worked at UiPath, so I get it. But yeah, I think this is good. So please.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I think first understanding my personal motivation is to just be a lifelong learner. Like, I graduated with a liberal arts degree in communication. I was like, because I went to UC San Diego. That school is just very theoretical based, and I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. So like, let's get into the work industry and like let's figure out how I can build just a kind of like nice repertoire of like hard skills and soft skills that like I can use. But I feel like every role that I was going for, if you'll look at my LinkedIn, like you'll see none of them are really the same. You know, I started in professional services, you know, kind of working on the more tech side, and then was like, yeah, actually I want to go more technical. So went in to another company where I was a customer success engineer, customer support engineer, which I find a lot of people actually do kind of get their start there, kind of on one side of the equation.
I agree. I always suggest, I'm going to go pre-sales, go post-sales first. I say it every
Oh yeah, it's so good.
The same thing.
Yeah.
Like,
And even to that point, like when I moved to front, and I'm really grateful that they like hired me without customers, like customer success experience. They hired me in as a CSM. As their first CSM, I was managing like 2,000 customers, which was one pretty wild that they didn't have a CSM up until they had 2,000 customers. So pretty cool. But like any startup that you join, when you're kind of in post sales where there's customers who are using your product, they know where the gaps are and they're challenging you to give them more value. You're just like, I got to learn. I have to absolutely understand what the product does. And then two, I have to be able to formulate like, where's the value for them. And then when you're working at a company that has many use cases or many kind of buyer personas, you start to like really inherently understand the value and then be able to be dynamic in pitching it. And so from there, it was really interesting for me, you know, as a person that's always learning and wanting to kind of challenge myself in that capacity, I wanted to go be a PM. So kind of made the switch.
there, homie.
Made the switch over to product manager. That was a really interesting time. Learned a lot more about how prioritization, problem definition, making sure like those are all clear, working with internal stakeholders. It was a very interesting experience for me. And then at that point, kind of, you know, decided as well, like kind of to go back into the go-to-market space. I think for me, one of the really interesting things about product management is your lens is about solving a specific problem, whereas in some world where you're in like post-sales or even like pre-sales with solutions engineering, you're listening, you're inviting all the problems to come through, and then you figure out what are the ones to solve for and give the customer that opportunity to kind of see the vision and see where we can give value. Whereas I think from the product manager perspective, it's like, this is the one we're going to solve, and like, let me find the best way to solve this, where we're kind of like seeing kind of a maybe broader picture to start. But yeah, that kind of led me to the solutions engineering role. I will say one thing before I was able to make the move into solutions engineering. I was actually trying very hard to find another role that wasn't solutions engineering. And
why is that? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's super weird because before I moved into product manager, the product manager role, I did a brief stint in solutions engineering. It was 1 quarter long. We were shuffling books, so it didn't make sense to like have me have a book as a customer success manager and then like, you know, like move on from there. It just would have been like not a great experience for the customer. And so because I had that experience, I was I felt like I had already done it, even though I had not given it a real fair kind of chance. And also, if you know you're only going to be in the role for 1 quarter, like your manager is probably not going to make you do the actual job. They're going to find a way to resource you, but you're kind of not doing the same thing. So
I actually, hold on. Side note.
yeah,
That right there is kind of key, because for some people that, you know, trying to like navigate like a corporate landscape, what you just said is key. Sometimes you're going to be pulled into situations, right? And keep me honest here, right? And especially you're king shit over there now, right? So you got a little bit more stroke, right? But would you say that sometimes when people get hired for roles, it's not necessarily what's on paper, but more what that role needs to be in that specific time, right? And I think that's what 100%. You're describing, where you said, oh, I'm going to go do this SE thing, but I'm going to be I'm resourced. It means we know where his gaps are. So let's mask them and have him handle X. Would you say that that's what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, I will
like I said, I'm assuming a lot, but I'm also like, that was a nugget. I was like, whoa, hold on, like I want to dig into that. So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think for this, it was maybe a little bit of the not gaps, but more like, we know that he is going to be good at these things already, so let's tap into that, while like the role itself is not yet ready for him to kind of go into. Because we haven't yet like figured out roadmap, et cetera, et cetera. There just wasn't actually capacity on that team yet for me to go in. Gotcha. But yeah, I think just kind of going towards the solutions engineering side, because I'm sure that's where a lot of the listeners are really interested in, like, because I was coming from the perspective of like, oh, I want to find the job and it's not solutions engineering. It was really interesting for me because I was just like, okay, well, if it's not that and it's not all these other things, like what is it? And so I kind of looked more inward, and I just truly, pen and paper, was writing like, these are all of my motivations. Like, I really like to be in the spotlight. I really like this. And it was really, I mean, I'm also grateful for my manager. His name is Steve. And
Love Steve.
At that point, he was the only solutions leader at that point. There was nobody on the team. And when I had left the team, he told me, he's like, there will always be a spot for you.
Wow.
And so that was
good
pretty
for you,
impactful.
man. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really, really grateful for him. So I kind of just went up to him one day, took him out to coffee, and we're just like, hey, Steve, these are all the things that I really like to do. Is this solutions engineering or not? Now, some of these are like more personal motivations and intrinsic things that I find value in, not necessarily like is super indicative of like just being a solutions engineer. Also being a solutions engineer at a team of like one is different than like going into one where it's like well established. So like he was like, yep, like we can make this happen. These are complements to my skill sets, and then that's ultimately how I started getting into solutions engineering. Now, pre-sales it's really interesting going into pre-sales from a post-sales
keep going,
capacity.
Man. Keep talking about it. Man. I love it. I love this combo. Okay, why is that? Just curious.
So when you're in post-sales, you have to understand that the place in the customer journey where you're interacting with them is somewhat already like, customers have already had some amount of value realization. They've also come to the reality that your product can't deliver everything that they're looking for, right? And so I'm not saying, to be clear, that in pre-sales you are painting a vision that you cannot deliver on, but what I am saying is you have actually a really good perspective of value that you can be confident in that you deliver to customers. And then you just need to pull that all the way back and simplify that message a whole lot more for a new customer, right? I think this kind of speaks to all the solutions engineering fundamentals. Like, don't really keep things simple, make sure it's digestible. You don't need to oversell your product. Make sure they can understand you. If they can't understand you, like, what good use is your time being spent there? And then just hone in on like value for specific sets of problems versus all the value that they could have because you've just you've literally drowned them in value, and now they're paralyzed and can't decide how to move forward.
Well, hold on. I
Yeah.
want to continue the thought before we go on, because I think what you're
Yeah.
describing there is sometimes we get caught in, and I think if you're new to the selling motion, what you're describing is, it's the way I look at things. It's being a little more tactical up front
Mm-hmm.
instead of doing a little bit of art of the possible. Whereas,
Mm-hmm.
if you're thinking more, and I'm bringing this up to say, like, mid-market and SMB can be that more tactical, talk about
Yeah.
problems. They're probably more apparent. You know this, you've worked at a smaller
Mm-hmm.
company, right? You can pinpoint your problems a little bit
Yeah.
deeper versus, I mean, I'm a Salesforce now, right? Like, Salesforce
Yeah.
is a massive organization, right? How you sell
Yeah.
CRM is fundamentally different than, I would say, even a solution like Front. Front is honestly, not for nothing, it would be considered a gadget in comparison to a CRM, right? So how do you feel about that? Like, what happens when, I guess I'm looking at bigger thoughts here, and I'd love to hear your perspective on, is there a time and place for you to run, I would consider, a more tactical play
Mm-hmm.
at a bigger organization? Or do you
Mm.
think your motion should actually match the product that you're selling? I'm going to leave it there and ask, because I know that's a loaded
Ooh.
question, but I'd love to get your
Yeah.
perspective on it. Yeah.
Tactical and a bigger.
Because
Yeah. I mean, I
you
think.
see where I'm going with this, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really interesting question. I mean, I think that the way that I would approach answering that question matches, or it maps like how your business prioritizes probably
okay.
revenue. So
Okay.
if your business is a really strong land and expand motion, then you get the customer in. Maybe the tactical one is one where you've been able to see from a data perspective, like time to close is like much shorter, and like you're totally good there. Now you have to make sure the incentives for, I mean, it all comes down to incentives at the end of the day with go to market, but like you need to make sure all your incentives do ladder up nicely and you have a nice handoff process. So that like the customer, as they go through the various touch points and milestones, that things are not falling through their cracks, or they're like having to restate themselves, and like that's just not a great buying experience either. But I think the product lens is super interesting as well. Like the one of the things that I've also come to realize now, because I've been at Front for 8 years, like part of me is like, man, like there are companies out there where the product is so easy to buy. Like that's amazing. The change management curve is so low. Like
right.
bless, right?
Right.
But
Yep.
also then maybe solutions engienering doesn't have a place there. But in
Right.
any
It's like, it's
case,
kind of sells itself. It's pretty easy. Like,
it's a double-edged
yeah.
sword.
Right.
But I actually think it's super interesting as we at Front have had more or less the same kind of like inbox ticketing help desk replacement solution. Change management is so hard when you're selling against status quo versus selling against an incumbent. Like
Yep.
the customer is on a different part of the change curve, and you have to educate them about why either the existing solution doesn't work, so status quo, or like why you're better than this other system. Each has their own trade-off in different
Mhm.
ways that you have to educate a customer on, or a buyer through. But it's just super fascinating. I think for us, we've oscillated between this idea of like try to like not get the customer in the product, because then you don't front load change management and you really just keep it at a product evaluation. At that point, maybe you are a lot more tactical, right? You're focusing
Okay.
on the problems, you're value selling, because that's really kind of the only tool you have in your repertoire at this stage. And you're doing a ton of custom demos, like you're demoing the heck out of them, but super tailored to their processes.
Yes.
Or if it's super easy, like the change management curve is super low. I've seen other enterprise companies just like throw you into the pilot, like let's start getting some usage in there, because like you're a net new product, you're a net new process, you're not replacing any of the existing ones in a very high lift capacity. In that case, okay, like maybe our validation like processes are slightly different, less tactical. You can have more space to intertwine kind of both usage data, trial data, as well as like higher level like vision of like where we can go, because it's just you'll have more kind of to work with.
Mhm.
I don't know if that answers
So
your question, because it's
no,
long-winded as well.
it's I was teeing you up to just like run, because I think the big thing that, like, and I deal with this to some degree in automation too, is like I will die on the hill that automation and integration as a concept, integration can live at more of an enterprise pie in the sky vision type
Mhm.
level, because integration comes down to, do we at least have our processes mapped to know
Yeah.
where data needs to go from one to another. That's a more of an executive conversation because it does fit the
Yeah.
change management. Whereas, and I would say even to some degree, like I could do probably somewhat of what Front does without Front. I mean, obviously the value prop of Front is having a
Yeah.
freaking module to do it, right? But
Yeah.
if I needed to just basically go through an inbox, grab something, and then throw some, like I could do it as a model. Granted, it's a custom solution. Hey, by the way, if you're looking
Yeah.
at Front, you should look at Front, right? Like,
Yeah.
but you see where I'm going is like that's where it starts to you start to flip that switch of maybe I do need to be more tactical in this specific motion because of X, Y, and Z. Because even if we know, okay, they know there's a change management exercise coming, guess what? They're immediately going to ask you, okay, cool. How's it work?
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? And usually when you get down to when you're not at the ERP or CRM level, you're not at the cloud provider level right now. This is where the game's played, right? Like it's companies like us, right? Because I'm at MuleSoft, just because I'm at Salesforce, they have a bunch of other products, Tableau, Slack, MuleSoft, etc. Right? We get it's really interesting because you'll have an enterprise type motion going on, but then when you have us sitting on the tactical. So I brought that up just to kind of hear perspectives on it.
Yeah.
Because I think it's always a constant thing that if you're getting involved for the first time, you don't even know like the whole inner working of B2B or B2C sales. Like you're like, what are all these terms? What's going on? And then you start to learn, and then you start to shape your own perspective, and you start to piss some reps off that you work with sometimes because they want to look at it from. So that's why I asked the question. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I just wanted to hear some perspectives. I guess the follow-up I did want to ask though is actually, I think here's the better question. How do you identify the proper people in the selling motion to target when giving this presentation? And I don't mean that in terms of who has money and who's got the purse. We all know that's important. What are you looking for to make the champions inside of the organization?
Yeah. Who feels the most pain? I think
okay, consultant answer, got it, right? Like, but I think there's a little bit of an art to that, and I think if you walk through that, I think it would help. I get where you're going. I would say the same exact thing.
Sure.
I'm being facetious, but like, but to me, and just to kind of answer that question for you a little bit, like with automation, I'm finding the person who either is getting the work alleviated, right, or the person who wants to learn how it works.
Yeah,
and that would like go against a lot of like building big deal scenarios. But here's what I know. I sold an RPA solution, and by me, Jason, if you're listening to this, Jason, I got you, boy. I'm not going to take away your thunder. Same thing with Julie, right? But I was part of these really, really big deals where we did exactly that. They came to us with a legit problem. It's very pointed. We showed them how we solved the pointed problem, and it grew into. And then all of a sudden, now we had champions inside the organization. We weren't selling as much as we were solutioning, right? It's very different. So I'm just curious. Do you share the same input? Like, what's the
For sure. I mean, like with the product that we have here at Front, like the person that can be bringing us to the table could be someone in IT, could be
virtually anyone,
could be literally anyone that has a communication problem could be bringing us into the conversation. Now, how do we make a champion, or how do we identify like who is the right person to kind of laser focus in on, try to convert them to be a champion? Like that to us is both a combination of like some standard sales fundamentals, like who's got power, but like at the end of the day, what we care about is just like, are we solving these problems, and who's feeling these problems like the most? And you want to make sure that person's bought in, because if that person is bought in, they can more clearly articulate, literally, this is my problem. They solve it in this way, and they will then be able to extend that value to other teams that have similar problems, right? Because we're talking about a pretty like ubiquitous problem set. Like we solve like collaboration with an email is shit. So like, okay, sorry for swearing, but like,
dude, like I dropped a ton of stuff. You're fine. This is we're not, FCC regulated or anything.
But just like, who feels this pain, and they have a good understanding as to why that pain exists. And if we can help arm them with ultimately like a solution that they can grok, then they can shop that around. And that's ultimately how we have helped with our land and expand motion, both in existing business, but as much as we can try to do that in pre-sales, like we try to do that as well.
Wow, awesome. That's great to hear.
Yeah. Well, one thing I feel like we didn't actually get back to, and maybe I should circle back to your original question.
I mean, I was going to do it if you didn't, so go on. You're fine.
How did I kind of make this decision to go into management, right? So was principal, and then moved into the management role. So one of the things I think is really interesting when we're talking with solutions engineering folks, these are people that are like supremely talented, right? Like they can do anything, drop them in the ocean, they will find a way to land. Like amazing, amazing human beings who are super growth motivated as well. And so I find now, like, I'm having conversations with my team, but I've also had conversations with other people outside of my company about like, hey, like I feel like I want to explore this world. Like help me understand like how I should think about it. And so all I can share is my experience. So if you haven't gotten a sense of this, like I'm a pretty reflective dude. So
I mean, I
what
gathered that.
went back to my trusted notebook and I was just like, if I'm gonna go be a manager, like let me make sure I have the right motivations for this. So like again, what am I motivated now by? And it's super interesting to do this experience before you make a move into the solutions engineering space and then like do it again. Like, and you should honestly be doing this like maybe every year so that you understand like, has my motivation changed? Right. And when you start, like, I will be honest and say like my motivation when I went into solutions engineering was I want the spotlight to be on me. I'm not afraid to say it, like I just
It's a
really
fun
like the
reason. Sure.
limelight.
I mean, you're gonna
Yeah,
get it.
exactly. Like, hey, like I want to be I want my face everywhere. I want people to be hearing my
Yeah,
content, seeing and doing the things that I'm doing and putting out there. Like that makes me feel really happy. Now,
sure.
when you think about when I was again revisiting this, I was like, I feel like I've had my time in the limelight. What motivates me is actually seeing people that I'm working with be super successful and know that I had a hand in making that happen. Plus, as you spend more time in the business, you're also just more keenly aware of like you can apply a critical eye on like these are the problems that like if we fix like will really help support the business but also like my team. And I've found myself really gravitating to that kind of space. Like I want to multiply. I want this kind of multiplier effect on the business, which is to say like more, I mean, it feels like big headed to say, but like more of me would be better for the business than just me alone doing the things that I'm doing in a silo, right? So you kind of
I
have to
love that.
have this like
Yeah.
enablement drive. And I was doing I mean, small company, we didn't have enablement. Like I was doing so much enablement. I was building like enablement videos for like fundamentals email 101. What's a provider? What's a client? Like you're really trying to break all of this down because you just want people to be able to self-serve and like get the answers and be trained well so like everyone can just like level up, right? And so as I've done more of that and I found myself enjoying it, that's when I was like, you know, and also the fact that you're reflecting on it, not just like, oh, I want to like be a manager because I'll get paid
Mhm.
more, like, which is also not necessarily the case either. Like you can be a strong IC
Oh,
for
yeah,
40
I
times as much
know
as
that
well.
at my level, I'm probably doing just as well as some directors, if not better. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? Like,
like
I'm aware,
exactly.
like, sometimes there's optics to it versus yes, I agree. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I think really understanding like what your motivation is and just like it's your notebook. Like no one's looking at your notebook unless you're leaving it out there for people to read. Be just dead honest. Like I want to be in the room when we're making the decision. Okay, cool. Like that's really good. And that's a conversation you can also have with your manager as a principal without being a people leader, right? Like the people leader
Yep.
is not that. The people leader is all this other stuff as well. And so like that to me was where I was able to like look at all the things that I've written down. And
Mhm.
um I think that the slight again opportunity like the opportunity that like kind of came to me versus I was asking. And I think that was a really obviously like a grateful experience. Like people usually have to ask and like go and like do these things. The company was at a stage where we were growing and we needed this role because we were looking to hire more people. And because I had been up front for so long, like it made a lot of sense. But I also wanted to make sure I was stepping into this role eyes wide open of areas that I wanted to lean in with. What is my philosophy for people management? And you kind of just, I feel like if you're spending time thinking about it, honestly, when I was talking with our HRBP, they're like, you know, the fact that we're having a conversation about how you're thinking about being a manager is a good enough sign to me that you will be a good people manager, right? Like if you care deeply about your craft and your thoughts are more about the business and about the team and what you can contribute to them and you're always thinking about that, like you will be in a good place versus like, I want to continue to like, I want to be a manager. Like, I want to have all the spotlight on me. Like always, always, always me, 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 me. Like, I think that motivation is probably not the right way to lean into people management, at least to start with.
Sure. No, and to summarize kind of everything you said, because I mean, you honestly took the advice part and just ran with it. So great.
Oh,
I mean, no, dude, you're good. That's the end of the show, right? But I think what you've really described is, you really understood the essence of solutions engineering as a whole first. Then you started to realize how to, and my current manager says this, Justine, if you're listening, giving you credit, like being a multiplier, right? And I also heard that from my buddy Jared as well. He was one of the best bosses I ever have, still to this day. Right. Justine's nothing against you. Jared's my boy. Right. Like, but it's just more like, he said, he's like, his advice was always, you're doing too much. And I think he was also, because it was his first, I think it was his first like big boy corporate director gig as well. Right. But he was always a captain. So he knew how to inspire and motivate. He was always a captain. He played baseball in college. Right. So he knew how to lead a team. And I always considered myself like one of his assistant captains. You know what I mean? Like that's the way the guy led. But he looked at it the same way you did, which is like, how do I put myself in the position to make them better multipliers, right? So if, like I said, just rounded out an unconscious competence in the role, think about how to be a multiplier. And if you actually want to put yourself in the position to really, not for nothing, handle the administrative headache that comes with being a people
there's
manager.
a lot of that.
That's number 3, right? Like that's the reality. It seems like you're on the right trajectory, and it's really awesome to hear that too, and to kind of, I know this is my show, so now I'm gonna take it, right? It's really awesome to hear that for me, because like I've struggled with this concept of like, hey, do I actually want to be a people manager in the corporate space? I think I've really been able to build this brand of being like the little bit of rambunctious, rough around the edges, true individual contributor. But as I get older, as we had the baby, as we have another one on the way, I go, all right, my people would be like kids. So like, all right, like I'm being facetious, but then I'm sitting here saying, it's exactly what you said. Am I more valuable as the individual contributor, or am I more valuable as the multiplier? And I actually think I'm at a point in my life now where, and I'm even doing it at Salesforce now, where I'm with the current team, they were actually pretty solid. I think I was just a nice addition, but people who aren't as well versed in automation, reps, so on and so forth, I'm like expanding that sphere of influence, providing a perspective and helping them enable and educate themselves. And I completely agree with your advice wholeheartely. And yeah, I mean, is there anything else you want to add, dude? I mean, this has been honestly, like, it's been good for me to hear, but I think, but your career growth, while it has been a little bit, inflated to some degree because you were at front and it was a startup, it's very, very sound. And I think it's a really, really awesome progression into your mindset. So is there anything else you'd like to leave people with before we round out today?
Yeah, I think I've been a part of like PSC as a community, and like there's just and like this
Pre-Sales Collective, by the way, if you're listening to this, we haven't
Pre-Sales
been part of
Collective, really really good. As well as like a Reddit thread or Reddit community for like sales engineering. And I'm just like seeing so many people that are just so interested in breaking in. Like I think that is one super interesting. Like people like love this, and I'm so grateful that I'm here in this position and kind of stumbled into it, which is always an amazing experience.
Like all of us who are good, right?
Like exactly.
We're all just like, how do we hear?
But I think that like my advice for those people, I mean, similar to kind of what we were talking about before, like just get into a company that has this function exist and do amazing at your job, because sales engineering, solutions engineer, whatever you want to call it, like is such a dynamic role. I'm like 99% sure, like anything that you do, if you can be killer at it, you've like you're going to be really good in some part of this T-shaped career ladder, right? And then you just have to like help make the other components more robust. But I think if you are just so lasered on like moving and like your next role is SE no matter what, you're going to lose out on some opportunities to do some pretty cool things and to like honestly like build a really strong brand for yourself before you can then capitalize on that brand as an SC. Because I think that's honestly like my own personal journey, and that I found to be really, really helpful. And one thing that I really coach as I bring people onto my team is like what are we going to do to build your brand, right? It's all about brand building. How can we get
good?
People...
It's why you're the head, man. That's why it happened. Seriously though, like building other people. Yeah,
have a strong brand, get into a business that has SEs, do a great job, and I think the rest will fall into place.
I love it, man. Dude, thank you very very much for the chat today. I know we'll have others, obviously, after this. If people wanted to connect with you on LinkedIn, that would be cool. Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Connect away.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. So if you want to connect, linkedin.com/in/Andersen Yu right here.
Yep.
To summarize that out, he is the head of solutions engineering and architecture, and also just kind of a baller, to be honest with you, at Front right now. I mean, dude, now it's been a great combo. Yeah, and I am KJ with KJ's Corner. Thank you very much for listening. Hope we learned something today, and we'll see you guys next time. Cheers, guys.
All right. Thanks, everyone.